Welcome back, everybody, to Psychedelics Today. Solidarity Fridays, May 28th. We're joined with Michelle, Joe, and a guest today, Renn Butler. Renn, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you.
Great to be here. Exciting times.
Definitely. Before we get going here, just a reminder for those that might be interested in our upcoming course, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. Kicks off July 22nd. You can check out those dates at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And we also have some of the fall dates up as well. So go check that out. Love to have you in class there. I guess that's enough for education. Go check it out. Awesome, Renn. Well, you've been on the show before, but for those that may not know your work or haven't listened to the previous episode, would love to just hear a little bit about what you do and who you are.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I went to Esalen Institute in 1980 as a work scholar, and I had the good fortune of having many conversations with Rick Tarnas. And he is just working on the prototype of his books at that time. And I had already gotten interested in astrology, but needless to say, this was like a quantum leap of enthusiasm into my astrological understanding in my conversations with him. And I was able to do the month-long with Stan and Christina Grof at the end of 1980. That was right at the same time that Reagan got elected, so it was two different things were happening in my life, kind of, culturally. And I got very deeply interested in what I call holotropic astrology. This is the stream of Rick Tarnas research, which focuses on how we can look at alignments between the planets as they correspond to the archetypes, the perinatal matrices, the kind of experiences that emerge in deep self-exploration, holotropic breathwork, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And it's been my passion for over 40 years. I've written books about it, teach classes on it, and really excited about that. Rosetta Stone is what Grof calls archetypal astrology. It seems to be the only system that can successfully predict the content and timing of experiences in non-ordinary states, like a range of possibilities. We can't predict exactly what's going to happen, but it's very useful to have a map, when we go on a journey.
Wonderful.
You made an interesting point when we talked a few weeks ago, Renn, and maybe even a few months ago at this point, but something along the lines of this is it's interesting, and perhaps like a really good point is that it's not fatalistic. We're not saying like you are going to have X, Y, Z. More like these themes might come up more so than these other themes, right?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that perhaps the best case is for the first couple sessions or something along those lines.
That's
right?
correct. Yeah, yes. Rick makes it very clear that the astrology that he is sort of introducing or reintroducing to the world is non-fatalistic and non-deterministic. So we make a lot of space for the decisions that people make, free will, things like cultural context makes a big difference on how these archetypal energies will manifest in people's lives. The relationship we have with our unconscious is very important. And that's one of the wild cards. By exploring our psyches, we can help to turn energies in their most positive directions rather than just being kind of at effect of them. The age and stage of life are also very important. And then Rick makes the point, perhaps unmeasurable, such as karma and grace. So yes, archetypal astrology is archetypally predictive, not concretely predictive. We can never know exactly what's going to happen, but what it can help predict is the emotions that come up at a given time. We know when sessions are likely to be more plutonic, more material from Grof's third perinatal matrix, BPM3. So it's nice to know that ahead of time, times when there might be more aggression coming up. People might be more talkative under certain transits. There might be more emphasis on beauty. Certain transits are very helpful for overcoming trust issues, for receiving supportive physical contact for people that had deprivation issues in infancy and childhood, and hundreds of other nuances of experience. So, yeah, good point. I'm offering a course, my fourth course online this fall, starting the end of September, in holotropic and archetypal astrology. And it'd be an honor to have people in that. I'll be talking a lot about how different planetary archetypes may show up in our sessions, how we can support ourselves and other people during those transits, and then the range of expressions of those archetypal energies in the world of culture, in music, film, art, in philosophy, literature, poetry. It's a very wide-ranging course. And then also in our dreams. I'm interested in the astrology of dreams, and that, a lot about relationships, how we can look at our relationship chemistry as manifestations of synastry relationships in our charts together. So.
I'd like to probably talk about how this stuff, it's kind of taboo right now. Like, it makes us look, to many people, less than to be speaking about astrology. But given our orientation, where we come from, it's really important to discuss. The movement being highly influenced by shamanic traditions worldwide, Indian culture, Hinduism. So there's a whole stream of astrology there. And what happened? Did right around the time of the founding of the the Royal Society or whatever that Newton, Boyle, and a few others were part of, said, nope, it's all crap. We're not going to talk about it. And from then on, we weren't able to discuss these more ethereal things. And even Carl Jung was really into this, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if Freud was not involved in it as well. Just didn't want to speak about it publicly. But how do you think about this, Renn? You're working on this, kind of reclaiming this for people in the holotropic world, and I don't know, any comments?
I remember Robert Hand talking 40 years ago about so many psychologists that he knew that used astrology but were unwilling to admit it publicly. And this kind of astrology, archetypal astrology, this newest school of astrology, it really is more in line with the modern and postmodern sensibility. So we don't make claims that we can't sort of back up with research and with observation. We don't say, that you're going to die under this transit or this will happen. So it's a kind of an astrology that educated people can accept and embrace. As I said, it's archetypally predictive. It just adds so much to the therapeutic practice. It can help us to predict good days for sessions. It can help us to understand the material that comes up and to integrate it. It's just a very useful map. But one metaphor is that, we still have to keep our hands on the wheel. At a certain point, you have to let go of the map and just surrender into the experience, right? Our inner healer chooses the material for that session. We can't direct it or know exactly what's going to happen. But good point, Joe. Stan had to laugh that after years of unsuccessfully trying to find some kind of diagnostic technique, like the MMPI and the Rorschach test and the DSM categories, when they finally found a technique that could broadly predict people's experiences, the content of their experiences in sessions, it turned out to be something that was even further beyond the pale than psychedelics. But he had to acknowledge that this was kind of a Rosetta Stone. So, many people see astrology as the gold standard of superstition. And there is still kind of a lot of that traditional astrology out there, but astrology is evolving, is growing, and I think it's kind of moving in this direction.
Right.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I guess I'm a little bit behind. I don't know that much about astrology. I guess I was wondering, for me and the other listeners, could you define what is archetypal astrology and how is it different than what we might think of in normal astrology?
Yeah, sure. Well, as I said, it's non-fatalistic and non-deterministic. It's more about self-knowledge, self-understanding. Glenn Perry, who's involved in the school of psychological astrology, which is one of our closer cousins, says it's not about predicting events, it's about understanding the meaning of events. And there's a lot of emphasis here on self-actualization. There's a vector associated with every transit. There's a direction that is trying to push us toward healing, toward wholeness, toward opening. And the more we can cooperate with that, the more our inner healer can help us to get to those desirable places. We tend to focus on the planets and aspects. So alignments between the planets is the core of serious in-depth astrology as we see it. We tend to see the signs and the houses as more like secondary symbol systems. There is something to them, but they're more like adjectives or adverbs. So that you're a Pisces or a Cancer or something like that, or I know my sun in Aries, but it gets a lot more specific and a lot more powerful when you look at, your sun is in trine with Jupiter, your sun is opposition Saturn, this connections between the planets, alignments. Yeah.
And is that how the archetypes fit into it? I'm sorry to sound so ignorant. I just am totally new to this. How is that archetypal, I guess?
I'm the astrologer, so you don't have to apologize. No. So what we observe is that geometric alignments between the planets correspond in a synchronistic way, a non-causal way. We don't believe there's any kind of appreciable radiation or gravity or something that the planets are causing our behavior. It's some kind of suggests some kind of higher intelligence, cosmic creative principle, universal intelligence that sort of set the planets in motion in a playful way to mirror broadly the kind of archetypal themes that are emerging in our lives. So we can see astrology as like a 10-handed clock. The movements of Venus represent the universal mind's impulses toward love and beauty and harmony. The movements of Mars, and they all move at different speeds, the movements of Mars correspond to the universal mind's impulses toward action, assertion, anger, combativeness, the god of war for the Greeks. And then we look at how they align with each other. So it's like a moving kaleidoscope that constantly brings different archetypal themes to the fore, and then they gradually recede, and then other ones move into the fore and gradually recede. And it's very much owing a debt to Carl Jung's discovery of synchronicity. Most modern astrologers operate within that context, is that some kind of anima mundi is correlating the macrocosm of the planets with the microcosm of our human experience.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. That makes so much sense now. Thank you so much for explaining that. It's so beautiful. There are so many connections. Now I see them. It's very cool.
I think the next best question is, can you describe the inner healer? I hate to have to ask that because I would assume everybody knows on the show, but it would be great to hear it from your perspective.
Yeah, well, Stan coined this term. He also uses the term intrinsic healing intelligence interchangeably. And it's his observation that when people enter into holotropic or psychedelic states in a supportive context, like in a session or a ceremony, that they've essentially charged up the contents of their unconscious and weakened the ego's control structures so that whatever is inside of us can emerge. And there's some kind of higher intelligence within us, which is essentially the universal intelligence operating through us, which decides what material within us is causing the most problems and what it will bring forth for us to work on in that session. And the most that sitters and guides can do, therapists, is to cooperate with that, to get out of the way and just allow the client's own inner healer to do the work. So that circumvents the whole issue of all the different competing schools of psychology that would see, problems come from this level of the psyche or this level of the psyche, and this is the strategy to resolve them. Here we're trusting the person's own psyche to do the work. And it's a very optimistic understanding of the psyche. Freud, as you know, was pessimistic. He thought the most you could get was a kind of a unhappy compromise between the forces of the id, disowned sexual and aggressive energies, and the needs for us to fit into a society and a civilization. But Jung was much more optimistic. He realized that we're moving toward individuation. There's the archetype of the self within us, capital S, that is trying to move us toward wholeness and integration of the different parts within us. And I would say Grof is even more optimistic than Jung, because psychedelics are so much more powerful than dream work. He was able to take people through the full range of their inner repressed memories, to the point where their egos died at a certain point because all the trauma from that lifetime was consumed. And he found that these experiences are then automatically followed by tremendous breakthroughs. People automatically connect with what he calls intrinsic human values. So feelings of love, feelings of forgiveness, feelings of universal brotherhood and sisterhood, the desire to do meaningful work, to do something that feels like it's helping and not just, working in a chemical plant or something like that. Feelings of synergy with others, appreciation of nature, and reduction of aggression, reduction of fear. And these are tremendously beneficial qualities in not only in our own personal happiness, our ability to be happy and satisfied in our lives, but also in society, to have people that are less wound up, that are less angry, that are less projecting all their issues onto everybody around them all the time, and who are less likely to kind of engage in this war against Mother Nature, which in a way is a kind of a revenge against the pressure of the birth process. The sort of the feminine brings us into the world through this suffering, and so when this is unhealed, then people act it out against Mother Nature. This is one of the forces in the, environmental catastrophe that we're in right now. So it's very beneficial to allow this inner healer to come forth, and we just have to create safe sets and settings to do it.
Michelle, I'm curious. Have we ever run through that with you? Are you familiar with that particular Grof concept before?
Not. I mean, from my own reading, it's all ringing a bell, but no, not formally.
Cool. Yeah, it's to me, one of the more important parts of his theorizing really makes a big difference. Yeah. Like my analogy is always the same way your body knows how to heal a cut. Your body also knows how to heal psyche when you put the right conditions in place.
It's really interesting to hear it spoken of in these terms because, it is something that a concept I am familiar with, right? And people in the psychedelic community do love to talk about it, but without this much context, I feel like it's only making sense to me for the first time. This is great. No, I really appreciate it.
They usually bring it up in like the trainings, like the MAPS training. They really emphasize it because they're pulling from a lot of Stan's like ideology there.
And a lot of the research for my book, a lot of folks, everyone talks about inner healing intelligence, the inner healer, and but to think about it in these terms, or especially more like astrological terms, or like just human as an essential part of nature, and maybe things we do are a reaction to that rather than a reaction to maybe something that just happened 5 minutes ago. It's like larger than that is a really helpful way for me to think about this. Yeah.
Yeah. And, this faith in the inner healer is based on many observations of thousands of sessions of Grof, is that any negative emotion or state of consciousness, if allowed to be fully experienced, if we surrender to it, will resolve on its own. So again, we just have to cooperate with it, stay lying down, keep facing it, and it will resolve. And it's easier to sit for people when you have that understanding in a way. You're not trying to be the engineer going in and fixing them or doing some kind of energy work or some sort of intervention. And we actually, in this approach, we discourage people from doing those other modalities, bringing those in. Just sit. It's all about human contact and trust. You just sit back quietly. If the journeyer needs something, then you respond. Otherwise, you stay out of the way.
It's probably the hardest thing to do. And I think very opposite of how traditional people get trained in, like, say, counseling, for example. It's been interesting having so much breathwork training and being very non-directive and getting a lot of feedback in like supervision throughout the years of like more direction. And I'm like, I don't know, I guess I always come back to, those really trusting the inner healing intelligence within people.
It's really interesting, Kyle. I'd love to hear some people who are trained in the psychedelic space kind of supervise you and what their feedback would be. Because I would hope it would be a little different. But
Might be different.
It's talk, right, versus guiding a psychedelic session. Which I'm sure is really different from if you were doing like direct somatic work with people, how that might be different than normal talk therapy.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot there.
Of course, in psycholytic therapy, that would be smaller dosages, and then the catalyst is a kind of adjunct to verbal therapy. But in higher dosages, you don't want to engage people's rational minds. It's like trying to push a moving train with your foot. You just have to get on and hold on, right? With higher dosages. So, it's impossible to do that kind of verbal work, and in a way slows the process down. And we don't know what people need to go through. What is the thing that will lead to the healing? It could be something completely unexpected, a past life experience or consciousness of a specific animal or a consciousness of a plant even, or something from the collective unconscious of humanity. Memories.
Yeah, I think anyone who does any kind of, inner journey work, whatever you want to call it, has experienced this. I mean, I've definitely have done, without a guide. I guess I wonder, what's the point of a guide if you have an inner healing intelligence? Sorry, that's always where my mind goes. I'm a very individualistic type person, but I get a little confused there sometimes. I suppose the support is really helpful for a lot of folks, but once you sort of learn to manage and navigate like high dose psilocybin sessions, like, do you really need someone to help?
It's to improve the feeling of safety. And with the feeling of safety being higher, you can go deeper.
Yeah.
That's how I frame it. Renn, how do you frame it?
You never know in principle when something more intense than usual will come up. And so it's to prepare for that moment. There's quite a bit of intense material in most of our psyches, and at a certain point, things can open up, and another door in the inner house can open. There are also situations where perhaps unmet needs from infancy and childhood can surface, and not everyone has this. But the people that have those kind of what Stan calls problems of omission, it's miraculous to have kind human support, non-sexual physical contact with sitters can be a magical healing process. But we let the client ask for it. It's not something that's volunteered, if they ask for it. And then at the end of sessions, it can be very beneficial to have focused body work if the client wants that. If we have unresolved physical tension somewhere that wasn't there before the session, then they can guide our hands to that spot, and then they take some deep breaths and we press down very hard on that spot, and then we encourage them to make any sounds or movements that want to happen. And so that body work can be very beneficial. That's something you can't do on your own. So those are some of the reasons.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. It reminds me more of, kind of sometimes what you see in more shamanic ceremonies, for sure. This kind of energy body work. Yeah, that's really fascinating. It's beautiful. Thank you for explaining that. It sounds really beautiful.
Truly to have, the ideal is a male-female dyad sitting team. So sober sitters that are just, and one client at a time, so a male and a female sitting for one person. And that is a blessed healing opportunity for people to be in that situation. It's an incredible privilege to be part of it, Yeah.
Before we jump over to news, I wanted to kind of go back to Joe's comment about like a little bit of the pushback kind of within the psychedelic community at times, especially within like the scientific area with astrology. It was really interesting, Renn, when we were chatting a few weeks ago, and you were just chatting about the Grof transpersonal training. No, not GTT, Grof legacy training. And when I went on their website, I saw that on their website, they're talking about one of the core aspects, and I think Stan said the future is in archetypal astrology. And I found that to be really, really fascinating that they're starting to include archetypal astrology into their training program in the Grof legacy training. And so when people always either make comments to us about astrology, I always have to go back to, our roots and foundation are really in holotropic breathwork, transpersonal breathwork, Stan Grof. And, this is why I come back to it. These working with depth, psyche, the archetypes. I mean, that's a huge part of, my background as well. And so, I just wanted to know if you have any comments around that and to kind of maybe justify, I don't know if that was Stan's decision to include that into their curriculum, but I just found that super fascinating that there's that comment made on their website about archetypal astrology.
Yeah, well, it certainly gives credibility to it, doesn't it? Because he's such a giant of it, not only a mind, but also a human experience. Yeah, his understanding went through a number of different evolutions and expansions over the years. He began as a Freudian, so he thought that the psyche began at, the moment of birth, and then, through childhood and so on. So the biographical layer of the psyche. And then his clients and his own experiences showed him that there were deeper experiences, perinatal experiences, so confrontations with death and mortality, and also obstetric memories of reliving our births. This is the perinatal layer of birth and death. And then as self-exploration continued, he and his clients also began to have transpersonal experiences, so beyond the boundaries of the individual in both time and space altogether. And so these were several major evolutions. And then his work with Rick Tarnas has, confirmed over many decades that the sort of the main players, vectors, forces, and principles in the psyche are archetypal. We understand this in a kind of Platonic way in Plato's. They are first causes. They are the capital F forms. All beauty is an emanation of the archetype of the beautiful, capital B. And so this map that can show us how the state of the collective psyche is activated at a certain time, and also our individual psyches, will show us how those core principles and forces in our psyche are being constellated or combined at a certain moment. And so, yeah, I was impressed with that too. The American Grof Legacy Training website, Jade DeFreshu and several other high-profile people, are making that a cornerstone of the training. So it's wonderful. Becca Tarnas will be part of that, and Huron LeGrace. Yeah.
All right. Should we switch over to news?
Unless, Renn, there's anything else you want to point out before we jump into these articles?
Yeah, well, we're going to be doing a monthly sort of world transit report together here, and probably call it your cosmic weather report. So we'll be looking at kind of the month ahead. What are the dominant archetypal influences for each of the 4 weeks in the coming month? And your viewers might enjoy that. It's just a way to kind of understand what's coming up, and maybe make some adjustments in how you're doing your sessions and so on. And it'll be a fun way to talk about inner experiences and maybe some correlations with outer world events. In the world of not doing sessions, how are these energies showing up? Mostly negative ways. So I really look forward to doing that. And I think Kyle will be the main host of that. I hope Joe will come on sometimes if he wants to. But I want to invite some other friends and colleagues like James Moran. I'm going to invite Rick Tarnas, Becca Tarnas, Alex Stein, and probably Art Granoff. These are all people that have experience in holotropic astrology. So really looking forward to this.
I'm super pumped for it. It's going to be exciting. And I guess I know transits can get pretty in depth. I wonder, just a brief outline for the next month if you have it offhand. Anything to look out for? Do like a little teaser.
That's what I was thinking. That's news, right? I think that's a good way to transition. Let's see what our transits are, and then we can move on to these other things.
I'll make it brief, but it's hard to do it briefly because there are so many things. I'll just look at the most.
Maybe 1 week then or something, but yeah.
Well, Mars is opposition Pluto now in the sky, 180 degrees apart for about the next 3 weeks. This can intensify the amount of aggression that can come up in sessions. So this is something that is in everybody, and it's very beneficial to express it when it comes out. To stay lying down and just let yourself yell. You can hit the sides of the mat and let it out. We're also in Mercury trine Jupiter. People can have a degree of farsightedness, a lot of interesting expansive insights under this transit for the next about a week. And then Venus trine Jupiter for about the next 2 weeks is unusually positive for a sense of grand beauty. It's very helpful for the sociable side of sessions. So after the session's over, to bond with friends with a special rebirth day potluck feast, or a walk in nature, or a little dance or something like that. It expands the sociable side. So that's about halfway through. Is that okay? Is that the right amount? Okay.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to these.
Now, about the middle of the month, from about the 17th on, Mars will be lighting up the Saturn-Uranus square in the sky. Mars will be squaring Uranus and in opposition with Saturn from about June 17th through the rest of the month. So Saturn-Uranus is this often tense interplay between forces of reactionism and fear, and the wanting to hold on to the past, Saturn, and the forces of change, breakthroughs, progress, moving toward the future, Uranus. And we're seeing this in extremist, wild conspiracy theories, and the culture wars are just reaching kind of cartoonish levels of extremism. Well, from the second half of June, that is likely to have a kind of an aggressive element added to it, as if we need that. Mars will be lighting up the Saturn-Uranus. So, hostile confrontations and opinions and tense confrontations. There can be sudden polarities between people, between different groups. It's sessions, as you always, are a great place to face this energy. So when Mars-Saturn, we can face a sense of being stuck or compressed or constricted, sometimes feelings of choking. It can be related to the birth memory of choking can surface. And we feel that energy and let ourselves kind of squeeze into the energy to be constricted. And then that will have this explosive liberations of energy, the Mars-Uranus. There could be a sudden breaking free out of that, and sort of discharges of aggressive energy for the second half of June. So that's my short-ish response.
Thank you. I'm terrified for the second half of next month, but thank you. Now I'm prepared.
No, we've been through this before.
That's so interesting.
You've been through this many times. It's
a good point.
Yeah, there are lots of easier things happening too, but that's a good one to know about. So it's good to be in a proper set and setting, so we can yell and so on. Possible.
Excellent. I really look forward to these. I'm going to learn so much. Thank you so much, Renn. So welcome. Interesting.
All right. So time for some news and commentary. So California, Scott Wiener, his project is getting a little closer to fruition, or D-Day. From CaliforniaGlobe.com, bill to decriminalize LSD, Mdma, hallucinogens, and other psychedelic drugs headed for full Senate vote. I thought it was a decent article. It's optimistic. It's really questionable on, I think, whether this is going to go through or not. But I think California is in such a budget crisis. Like, California has been really broke for a long time. So perhaps now is the time to stop spending so much on prisons and for nonviolent offenders. So I don't know. Who wants to jump in first?
I also like the aspect here about any prior criminal offenses for possession would be expunged. So if it does pass, I'm actually just really excited about that as well, to give some pardon to those that have been a victim of the drug war.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is also expensive, not only to those individuals, but to culture at large. We've lost a lot of participants in culture. And that's not a great thing.
Yeah, not at all. That's the exact point I wanted to bring up as well, Kyle. Really interesting. I suppose it'll only be prior criminal offenses for possession of the drugs they'll be legalizing, right? Not all drugs. Yeah.
Right.
But that's still good,
psychedelics.
especially in California, where I'm sure the majority of those arrests have taken place in the last 50 years. But so it looks like this is called Senate Bill 519 is going to be voted on in the Senate very soon on June 4th. So we should have another update for you guys on this one very soon. This article wasn't super optimistic. However, I honestly have no idea how this could go. I have no expectations, which is a good way to maybe go into it. But yeah, we'll see. It will also, the California Department of Public Health will have to come up with regulations for the therapeutic use of psychedelics by 2024, according to this bill. So that would also be really good for the California economy. I can imagine California being a, global-wide destination for psychedelic therapy if this does happen. So really interesting, something to keep an eye on. I will be so pleasantly surprised if this passes. It also says here, interestingly, possession of drug paraphernalia associated with psychedelics will also no longer carry criminal penalties as long as they are owned by adults 21 and over. So I wonder if that would legalize, I don't know, are acid testing strips legal in California and things is that considered drug? What kind of drug paraphernalia was illegal right now in California?
That's a state level situation in Denver. Mitch Gomez was part of a project in Denver to get test kits removed as paraphernalia, or at least paraphernalia not requiring a charge. I'm a little uncomfortable by that language. So it means 21 and under could still be a criminal penalty.
Which is lame because we should be teaching our teenagers to use drugs safely if they're going to use it all, because God knows they're probably the ones using them the most. But yeah, we've gone through similar things here in New Jersey right before cannabis was legal. There was all this weird language that was going to make penalties even worse for 18 to 21-year-olds, which would have been terrible. So hopefully that'll be the kind of thing that if this is passed, those kinks are worked out. I'm not really sure. Something for us definitely to keep reporting on and keeping our eyes on. Interesting, though.
I imagine that provision for 18 to 21-year-olds is mainly aimed at sellers, people who sell the paraphernalia and so on. I imagine it will be essentially decriminalized for that age group. I don't know, but I don't think they're going to want to prosecute people, but they don't want people to sell to that age group, and that seems fair enough.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, we'll have to see that. Yeah, interesting. Fingers crossed, everybody. Yeah.
Keep it
what
going.
A crazy momentum.
Yeah. And this new one that's really exciting, marijuanamoment.net broke this one. FDA clears researchers to study MDMA use by therapists being trained in psychedelic medicine. Finally. I think that's a big deal, a really big win, in my opinion. And I remember having this discussion quite energetically with Mike Margulies from Psychedelic Seminars at Horizons the last time we had that. And I was like, I agree with you, Mike, but how do we make an argument that convinces regulators? So it only took a year and a half after those conversations at Horizons for this to come to fruition, which I think is great. It's about time. Really exciting.
And much needed. I mean, to do the training, I think, efficiently and, responsibly, to be able to have people, if they want to go through an experience, have access to that. So it sounds like, because they were allowed to, some people were able to have their own sessions, but it sounds like the FDA kind of put a hold on that. So now they're stating that volunteers who are being trained to treat people with PTSD will be able to participate in phase 1 trials. So this is exciting too. It sounds like they're going to be doing a phase 1 trial on this to gain personal experience with the treatment option. And, this goes back to that old, debate. Should psychedelic therapists be able to have a psychedelic experience in their training to really understand how to sit with people? And yeah, what type of psychedelic training is it if you're not able to provide that at times? If you're trying to, train people in a therapy modality, but they're not able to get like experience, kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm so glad this passed. It's exciting because, yeah, I mean, is anyone really qualified to give this medicine if they haven't had the experience? Definitely could argue both ways. But I think a lot of us in the psychedelic community really felt like that's absurd. They really have to know what they're giving their client because it is a strong experience. And if you're really going to hold proper space for them, I think you should have gone through it. If you're like, physically healthy enough to do so and all those kinds of things. I imagine there might be some therapists with like heart conditions or something who will opt out for their personal choice. But hopefully they've had an experience when they were younger so they still know what it's like, because I really do feel like you should know, especially with MDMA and psilocybin and these higher doses. If you're going to really hold space for someone to, access their inner healer intelligence, you should have accessed yours in that space, in my opinion. It's interesting.
It's pretty interesting, too, with this phase 1 trial for MDMA-assisted therapies for therapists. They are stating that it's designed to, quote, measure the development of self-compassion, professional quality of life, and professional burnout among clinicians delivering the treatment to patients. Interesting things that they're trying to measure.
Yeah, the burnout thing is really interesting. We're actually working on a piece on the blog. It should be out probably not for like a month or so, but there are some researchers in Canada developing a ketamine-assisted like group therapy and somatic therapy, specifically trying to help frontline workers, with burnout, because it's such a real problem for, the healthcare industry in general. And so I would really be fascinated to see how those kinds of things move along, because yeah, professional burnout is a real problem. And maybe psychedelics could help people find inspiration, motivation again for the work that they love so much. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, it's a beautiful trend. Yeah, I mean, being around people going through strong emotions, that activates our own emotions. I mean, that's what's stressful, is that we have to hold down our own sorrow or fear or anger. And, in order to do this kind of support work successfully, we have to keep up with our own process.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I'm just even thinking about my own experiences, like working in mental health, and then like just being able to have access to breath work and really going down there and just blowing some steam off, getting, being able to have those experiences, get it out on the mat, and then show back up for clients, feeling like much more lighter. And it's such an important topic within this field. I mean, especially now, I think a lot of people are feeling burnout in the health profession in general with COVID and everything that's been going on. And yeah, to be able to have tools available, it's really important because, they're the people taking care of everybody. And if that like system is pretty weak and burnt out, you're not getting great care. And I've definitely seen that in some nonprofits that I worked at, just like the turnover rate, the burnout that people go through, and then just the quality of care that's being delivered. It's like, yeah, should therapists and mental health professionals in general be required to kind of engage in, some sort of practice therapy type thing to really, work on yourself so you can show up for your clients. I think it's super important.
Yeah, you want someone that's been there, that's had some of their own experiences.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it probably should be required. Like as Michelle said, unless people have a health problem, there could be good sitters out there that haven't had their own experiences or can't do anymore. But you want someone who's comfortable with the territory, who understands that you can go into very dark places at times, but then you'll come out of them automatically. Stan told me once that we all have to learn these things for ourselves. no matter how much studying you do, you still don't really understand this work until you have your own experiences. And so it's absolutely indispensable.
Next one here. It's more popular. People.com. I think it's the first time we had people.com on the site. Kristen Bell tried hallucinogenic mushrooms to help manage her depression. Dax Shepard was her sitter. The article was pretty funny. Like, I thought they did okay, given it was people.com. And it's a good example that, there's celebrities breaking the law in order to access healing. And, there's those ivory tower folks that say, no, it's okay for some of us to do that, but not you. And, I like that. I like that there's now kind of this counter current thing happening at the top, because it shows that the drug war is continuing to fail, and that people are going to find a way to healing to the best of their ability.
Yeah, it's like
Kristen Bell being quite privileged.
It's true, but it also is kind of funny, or like, I think good culturally, that like this is the new cultural norm, right? Like, woman, gets mushrooms, has her husband trips it for her. They use the word babysat, which is so funny, but like, fine. And she has a quote in there where it was like, this wasn't recreational. I just wanted to like have the experience and see if it could help me. And it did help her. But I also like that it wasn't super sensational. Like, even the way she spoke about it, I think it said something like, I still get depressed sometimes, but it comes in waves, which, like, obviously she just ate a lot of mushrooms. She's learning. But that's how I think about it now, right? Like, it comes in waves, and like, I can actually get over this wave, even though it feels really bad right now. Like, it's going to pass. I'm going to do some work, or it's just a bad day, or maybe we're in transition, right? I'm learning so much. But like, I think that it was a healthy way to have this in the mainstream, which made me kind of happy, especially this kind of more like self-use, adult use, still therapeutic, but not in the medical model. Which is, helping folks. And she also has this really kind of relatable experience, for me anyway, where she felt like mushrooms really reconnected her to her body. And I wonder, this is something I keep having myself and talking to other women about. And I wonder if this is going to be a more like talked about mainstream experience for women trying mushroom therapy for the first time, and really like, I've had these really beautiful experiences where I realize that I just ignore my body because it just causes me so much like fear in public, and all these things. To just inhibit a woman's body is like kind of terrifying. And to have like a moment of a pure appreciation and love for it on psychedelics is actually like a really beautiful thing that I really hope that more people have access to, even though it, like, I don't know how that would fit into a clinical trial, like it can with eating disorders and stuff, but just for anyone, like it's not even at a clinical bad disassociation place, but it's still so beneficial. So I thought it was like for a mainstream celebrity mushroom story, I was so happy with it.
And there wasn't much pushback? Have you heard anybody criticize?
It's a good question. Not personally. I'm sure it exists, but
I've not noticed anything.
I haven't noticed anything either. But yeah, from People magazine, I mean, I wonder if this is in the print mag that people are reading in airports and stuff, because that would be a big deal. Yeah.
I bet it is.
It's like the old professors have died, that old axiom that for a paradigm shift to unfold, sometimes the old professors have to die, like time has to go on, and then a new generation comes along, and then everyone just sees it as self-evident. So what a beautiful moment. It reminds me of the 60s. There were a few movie stars that talked openly about their LSD sessions. I mean, Cary Grant was one, right? Was Jack Nicholson another one? And it's just Just
really
reminds me of that time.
so interesting. Yeah, I bet there's a lot of similarities.
Right. That early era of work was populated by so many big names. Yeah, Oz Janiger, I think, was one of the big ones in the LA area, and there's a few others too. Captain Trips, Al Hubbard
was Ozzy Osbourne in there?
Secret Chiefs spent a lot of time talking about that. Ozzy Osbourne too.
I'm just kidding.
I wouldn't be surprised. Now we have like Mike Tyson and, but also like, this isn't on our list. But in this same week, Bill Burr, a comedian, was on Conan O'Brien talking about how he also took mushrooms kind of more for this like adult therapeutic use outside of a therapist situation. But he says he went to the desert. I bet he went to Joshua Tree. And he eats mushrooms, and you guys should watch the video. It's on latenightfeud.com. It's like a 3-minute clip, and he talks about how, it actually ended up being kind of like a bad trip. He felt like really lonely and like unloved or something, but he has this realization while he's still in the experience that, oh, this is how I felt as a child, and I've been running away from this for 30 years, and like kind of now like take some agency over that. And it's like really helping him, like, because he just became a dad to a second child, so he's really trying to work out some of his shit so he can be a good dad. And I thought that was also just like such a touching story and such a good example of like, healing these, I don't know if you want to call it intergenerational trauma, but just like healing family situations so you don't repeat the same mistakes as your parents, and you can be a better parent, and you can see yourself a little bit more clearly. I think it's like if this is how we're going to be talking about mushrooms from now on, like, I'm here for it. It's beautiful. I thought it was really cool. And he even corrects Conan, has a question at the end. He's like, so now that you're enlightened, and Bill stops him, he's like, Conan, I'm not enlightened. I just figured out like one little problem that I have, which was also such a healthy way to talk about psychedelic healing. So I'm here for these healing stories. I think they're great.
I think Bill Burr is a great candidate to be doing this. He's a straight shooter, from the Northeast. As far as I know, hasn't had any controversy like any of the other comedians yet.
Fingers crossed.
His approach is just so direct and honest that I just love it. I love him for it. He was also cameoed in The Mandalorian, by the way, recently, which I thought was hilarious. Super Boston accent. But this trend is coming, right? Like Hollywood as a whole, I don't think is ready to come out of the closet, but I think individuals are, and certain artists are feeling more brave. An observation I have that's a little awkward is, there's this specific psychedelic music culture. They're very often willing to talk about psychedelics, drugs, and harm reduction and whatnot. But there's a fair amount of musicians who are not that open to discussing stuff. And I wonder if that's possibly like a financial situation, like they're afraid they might lose contracts or something along those lines. But just an observation. I think it's coming.
Interesting you say that, because once I was interviewing a musician, and he was like, I have so many fans who are teenagers. Like and I think he was being really careful because he has so many underage fans that to come out for this actually really adult thing and to be talking about like, oh, I want to be a better dad with mushrooms or whatever, like is not really relatable to his 14-year-old fans. And is he going to be encouraging like teenagers to try this stuff maybe before they're really ready by talking about it publicly? I think this particular person, I don't want to out them just in case I don't have permission, but they did talk to me for an article and like in a pretty safe way. And so I think there is like a balance, and there's a way you can do it. That's not, because I think in the past it was like musicians just bragging about crazy drug use that like wasn't, not that every drug use has to be like positive, but it had no therapeutic value, and it was just to like be cool and risky and like whatever. So to move away from that culture to still be like, yeah, I still occasionally like do this thing, but it's like not all bad and boundary pushing. It's actually like making me a nice, calmer person is like an interesting new a way to go about this in the mainstream in like a safer way. It's going to hopefully make teenagers think mushrooms are really boring, and then they'll wait till they're like our age and messed up and need them. No, I don't know. That's a silly way to put it, but it's interesting. There's a lot of, I think people are trying to be really careful, but yeah, I hear what you're saying, Joe. I think sometimes, you know, we're trying to also just like save our own asses and try to skirt this like what's legal, what's acceptable line. But we're really pushing it a lot lately, and I think in a positive way.
I remember Paul McCartney outed the Beatles experimentations with LSD. This is in the big anthology, Beatles anthology. Great. Like 10 episode set, and he had been using it the least.
Oh, cool.
And he talked, I think about 1967, maybe 68. And then from that point on, that's all they got asked by the media, and Harrison and Lennon were really upset that he had done that, you know. So it's not very pleasant to be singled out, you know, but I think we just now reached the end of that period. You know, yeah.
There's a lot there. It's media. It's in itself is a really complicated topic, and like what happens to your career once you start going off about it. Because you know, not all Beatles songs are all that psychedelic, and not all Beatles activities were all that psychedelic. At times they were, but certainly not all the time.
Yeah, and to be such a talented musician and then to only get asked about LSD must be the most annoying thing. It's like, well, I also invented like maybe some new way to pick a guitar. Just like I wrote all these amazing songs, and all you can ask me about are my trips. Like I could see that being infuriating. Interesting.
Cool. I'd like to kind of wrap up now, but anything else we want to throw in before we close?
Good luck, California.
No. Renn, do you want to pitch your course again and where people can find your work? And maybe we'll do another pitch for the Cosmic Weather Report. I think we're shooting for the first episode to be end of June. I think that's when the release date will be. So a little teaser
really looking
there.
forward to it. Even if you're not interested in astrology, we'll introduce the concepts as we go, and I think it'll be a great learning experience. So my course starts the final Saturday of September. It'll be at noon Pacific time. I record them so you don't have to be there live for each class. And it'll be a wide-ranging journey through the realms of human culture and art, and also the human psyche, because everything in human culture comes from the psyche to begin with. So, and all connected to the reference system of archetypal astrology. So it'd be an honor to have people in there. My website is rennbutler.com, RENN Butler.com. And I have a page for my class, and there's an early bird rate right now of $625 US until June 1st. And that includes a full-length reading as well. So I'll just take this moment to, this is my most recent book, O Goddess, about relationships. And then this one has a lot of interesting psychedelic session reports, which aficionados of Stan Grof's writing will acknowledge. That's the most interesting part of his writing, are these session reports. Well, these are all ones that have never seen before. And then this is my kind of handbook on planetary combinations, the archetypal universe. So yeah, it's been fun being here today.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's been really lovely having you, and can't wait to do more with you. Hopefully some breathwork retreats in the future. Yes. We'll have to talk more about that.
Please, I need it.
So,
God, so bad.
We've been talking, Joe and I have mentioned maybe, something in Mexico, maybe this winter if COVID has waned enough. Yeah.
I can help you guys find a place.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right. So let's wrap it for now. Check out our course offering, psychedeliceducationcenter.com for more. really great stuff up there. And yeah, expect more from us. We're trying to do as much as we can to help everybody out the best we can. So we'll see you on the next episode of Psychedelics today in just a few days. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.